what do you want from this? Do you want healing? Do you want details? Do you want a divorce? Do you want a confession? Do you want an apology? Like, what are you actually hoping from this conversation? If you know that going into that, that's when now you would talk to your spouse and you'd say, like, what I'm hoping is that we can just have an honest conversation, or what I'm hoping for is that I can get the truth. Whatever that is that you're wanting, actually start the conversation with that sentence.
This show is dedicated to helping you strengthen your family tree and live financially free. Welcome to the Marriage, Kids, and Money podcast, everybody. This is Andy Hill, and today we're talking about what to do if your partner cheats. In marriage, infidelity can become a reality for some of us. Depending on what survey you read and which gender is answering the questions in the survey, the percentage of cheating in relationships wavers between 10 and 40% of couples. If this happens to us, what do we do? Do we pack up and say goodbye immediately? Or should we stay and realize that things like this happen? Or something in the middle? To help us with this topic of what to do with an unfaithful spouse, we've invited marriage experts Casey and Meygan Caston to the show today. Casey and Meygan are the founders of Marriage 365, the #1 marriage app for couples who want real change in their relationships. When Casey and Meygan aren't helping couples with their relationships, they enjoy spending time on the beach in Southern California, and hopefully their teens or preteens join them there at the beach as well. Welcome to the show, Casey and Meygan.
Thanks for having us, Andy.
So excited to be here.
Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. This is an important topic, especially if somebody found this link with the title. This is a serious topic, and I'm glad you guys are here to talk to us about this. Now, a decent amount of spouses are out there cheating on their partners, as we've talked about at the top of the show. Why is this happening?
Well, I'm going to say it is a very painful topic. And when you talk to someone who is dealing with infidelity or that process or healing from it, it's really, really hard. It can feel emotionally overwhelming, the amount of betrayal, the lack of trust. But actually, when you step back for a second and you understand why people cheat, why infidelity happens in relationships, it's actually very, very templated. In fact, when couples start telling their story, we kind of pause them halfway and we can finish the story and they'll go, how did you know? Because the #1 way, the reason why people cheat is because of loneliness and disconnection in relationships.
Yeah. And what kind of starts is, you're lonely in your marriage and you just kind of see everything through like a negative lens. And then someone at work, they compliment you. And you're like, wow, I don't remember the last time my spouse paid me a compliment. That kind of felt good, right? You go home and it's like there's that loneliness, that disconnection. There's no date nights, there's no fun, no romance. And then the next day you go to work and that same person, they compliment you on your work project. And you go, gosh, like, again, like my spouse hasn't paid me a compliment. Like I work really hard. They don't even appreciate how hard I work. And what happens is then you start building a friendship with this person at work. And then the friendship, you start sharing personal details about your struggles in your marriage. And usually it starts as an emotional affair. And people don't even realize it when it's happening. And then it can lead up, of course, to a sexual affair. Sometimes it doesn't go that route, but it, like Casey said, it is such a templative thing for about 90% of the time. There are those exceptions, but it really is that from that disconnection, we are made for connection. If we're not getting in our marriage, it's not like someone goes and looks to cheat. I think that's what people think. That's a common myth. It kind of just gradually happens and they don't even realize it's happening.
But I think there's actually a cultural moment that's happening right now too. And that is, I feel like couples have a low tolerance for working through relationship issues. Okay. And maybe it's the instant gratification culture that we have right now. So I just, think about how much time people spend scrolling through social media and getting that like instant dopa hit. And what that's actually happening, what's creating in us is we have a shrinking ability to be with ourselves. So we distract ourselves with social media and we spend very little time introspection. And I feel like, and spending time thinking about yourself and how you interacted with your spouse that last interaction, or processing pain or emotions, really leads to very low emotional intelligence. Okay. So that's kind of happening across our culture. Then couples get together and then they get stuck in a relationship issue and they don't know how to work through it. So then time kind of carries them apart. But this is where we hear this phrase, well, we just fell out of love, or we just grew apart. And what you need to read between lines is, no, you didn't grow apart. You didn't know what it takes to bring you back together. And so as time sets in, loneliness sets in. And after a while, like Meygan said, my spouse doesn't pay attention to me. So you're going to start to find it elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you guys have been marriage experts for a little while in this space, and you've been married for a little while. Why is this a topic that you are drawn to, or how has this been something that you guys have experienced in your marriage?
Well, interesting fact about Casey and I, between both sets of our parents, there's 12 marriages. So like his mom is on her sixth marriage. Oh yeah, do the math, right? It's complicated. My dad's on his third. Lots of infidelity, lots of blended families, remarry, divorce, remarry, divorce. And so we both were raised in homes with the pain that infidelity, causes, but also, of course, divorce. And it actually is, in a weird way, kind of something that drew us together when we were dating. Like that was like, oh, you know how that's like to come from an unhealthy infidelity home. Like I do too. But year 3 of our marriage, sure enough, we were following in our parents' footsteps and we were almost divorced. I was definitely the charge of the divorce. I was just over it. And luckily my best friend said, I think that's a pretty big decision to divorce your husband. You should go talk to somebody about that. So I went to go see a therapist, and she said 2 things that were so profound. And one of them was, have you done everything and anything you can to save your marriage so you don't live with regret? And I knew my answer was no. I had not done everything. And she said, unfortunately, Meygan, about 90% of people usually don't do everything and anything that they have, could possibly do. So the second thing is your husband's not here on this couch, but you are. And if you want to make a better marriage, it starts by making a better you. And so for 13 very long months, I worked on our marriage by myself. I decided and committed that I was going to be healthy no matter what happened with Casey, no matter if we chose to stay married or not, because that's what I vowed to do. And I want to be a healthy person. And through that, and modeling healthy behavior and kind of stopping those fight cycles and putting up boundaries and learning how to forgive, he noticed the change in me. And we started to reheal and rebuild our marriage. And long story short, when we started healing our marriage, it was just one of those things we saw. There wasn't a lot of resources out there. There was no you. You didn't have your podcast back then. This was almost 20 years ago. So social media wasn't even around. I know it's hard to imagine, but, and really the one option was kind of like go to therapy. But like, what do you do if you don't like therapy, don't have the money to go to therapy, or don't have a good therapist in your neighborhood? There were just no options. And so we really wanted to be innovators in the marriage space and help as many people as we could.
And I got to say, Meygan definitely is the hero of our story, because she started working on herself, right? Meanwhile, I was being stubborn, prideful, and just was like, no, I'm not going to do this. This is stupid. And probably like, well, you need to change, not me. But once she did, systems change theory says that when one part of the system changes, the whole system changes, right? So when we talk about one of our, our number one catchphrase people know us by is, if you want to make a better marriage, it starts by making a better you. And what we want, I think, what we want is, if you want to make a better marriage, it starts with changing your spouse. But the message of that, by making a better you, is a question of self-mastery, of improving your communication style, of like raising your emotional intelligence. And as Meygan did that,
I was going to say,
it changed us.
Well, it's very empowering. Sorry, babe, I interrupted you, but it's very empowering, because if you're sitting there waiting for your spouse to change, you're going to build resentment. It's going to feel like you're defeated. Like I'm stuck. I can't do anything because I just have to sit around and wait for my spouse to wake up one day and change. It's just not motivating. But if you're like, wow, there's actually a lot that I can do to change my marriage, even just by changing myself and my own attitude, it's very empowering.
Yeah. There is, like, the lead up to an affair typically has a story of couples getting stuck. And both of them are waiting for the other person to also join them.
Yeah.
And that's the myth that we're trying to debunk in culture, is like, don't just both stand there and saying, well, I won't go to therapy until he joins me, or I won't work on myself until they join me. Like, that's the kind of lead up to infidelity in affairs, is that both couples just kind of, it's like almost like a cop out. It's like, well, I won't work on my marriage until my spouse joins me.
Yeah, we're all about the be the change lifestyle here on the show. So I want to ask Meygan, what are some of those specific steps that you said to be a better you? Give us some tangible things that you did over that time, and then Casey, as you jumped on, what are some of the things that you were encouraged to do?
A couple of them were be all in. Like, if you're going to commit to really changing yourself, you can't do it based off of what you feel, because you're going to wake up one day with a spouse who's unwilling or a spouse who's in a bad mood, and you're not going to feel like wanting to work on yourself and work on your marriage. And so you have to kind of be all in. It's a mindset change. Another one is grow in self-awareness, because self-aware people are confident. Confidence is sexy. And there's a lot of people walking around on planet Earth here. They are lacking self-awareness. They think that's why people are very easily triggered. Like, I was triggered by everything Casey did. It actually had nothing to do with Casey. It was my own insecurities. And so he would say something and I would just take it so personally. And of course, we see this on social media and Hollywood and TV shows, and even just at family dinners, with the in-laws. It's like everyone is so on edge and triggered, but really that stems from a lack of self-confidence. So becoming self-aware and knowing your strengths, your weaknesses. Like, for an example, Casey for years would say, "You're so controlling. I just feel so controlled by you." And I would get defensive. No, I'm not. I'm not controlling. But then as I worked on myself, he was right. I was controlling. And so once I realized that I was controlling, he would say still like, "Oh, you're controlling." And then I would shift the conversation. Old Meygan would say a defensive statement. New Meygan, healthy Meygan would go, "You're right." And then I would move into an apology. So then another step is learning to apologize. Own your part. If you can own your part and be accountable for things, man, does that bring defenses down in a marriage? Your spouse, I mean, can you imagine Casey hearing me? For 3 years, I was, "No, I'm not controlling. No, I'm not controlling. You're controlling." All of a sudden it shifts and I'm like, "You're right." And his face, like his jaw dropped. He's like, did you just say you're right? Like, I'm right? What? And so it's things like that. But yeah, we have so many resources. I mean, there's a lot, more to it, but I would say that those are some great ones to definitely start with.
Yeah. Did you just fall down on your knees there, Casey, and Joy, when that happened, the first You're Right came out?
It was one of these like watershed moments. Cause I remember, the thing is that the humbling part was when she did that. And then the fights that I would instigate and then she would respond with graciousness. It was very clear I was the unhealthy spouse at that point. And I think the thing going for Meygan and I was we're both very competitive people, right?
Yeah.
We play games and, we trash talk each other.
Oh yeah.
When we were healthy, not when we were not, but we're competitive people. And I think that was like a motivating factor for me. It was like, well, I want to be healthy.
Absolutely. So talk to us about how your relationship is different today versus where you were when you were saying, "Oh man, we were on the brink of divorce."
Oh my gosh. Let me just tell you, like the fights that we would get into would last until 2 a.m. The fights that we would get into were so damaging to the core of our relationship because of the words we said, the things we said about each other, that it really became this, this combative environment. And, I always believed in World War II strategic philosophy, which is overwhelming force until the enemy capitulates. So it was everything in the kitchen sink that I throw at Meygan. And to think about now, we can talk about such sensitive topics because we have tools, we have better emotional intelligence, we have empathy, that we can take each other's perspective. And even if I disagree with Meygan in that moment, I don't have to take it personal. I just have to hear her perspective.
Yeah, I say like when we got married, we had the desire to have like a marriage tool belt, but we didn't actually have a tool belt or any tools. And now like not only do we have like, I say like a blinged out tool belt because I'm a girl and I like stuff like that. But we have so many tools to where when we're stuck, or not even just when we're stuck, like just on even tools to make sure that we're a team. I would say we were not a team. And now we're very much so a team. And you will even see if you follow us or see any resources, there's oftentimes we high five each other and we will actually verbally out loud say Team Caston in the hardest moments. And we've gone through some hard stuff in life, and I think like that team mindset we have and actually use the tools that we teach. And we know that if we don't, we fight, we get back into the same ruts, just like every other couple. And what's so amazing about, I think, marriage, and I know, Andy, that you share the same passion, it's not rocket science. You don't have to have a degree. You don't have to be a marriage and family therapist. In fact, marriage and family therapists often have some of the worst marriages, sorry to say, but we work with a lot. I feel bad. And there's reasons behind that. But I think that that's exciting and motivating for people listening to hear. Like anybody can be a better communicator. You just have to want to do it and then actually have a plan. Anyone can learn conflict resolution, anybody, but you have to want it and have a plan. And we give you the plan and the steps to do that at Marriage 360.
I love that. Yeah. It's, what do they say? Simple, not easy, right?
Yes. Yes.
Right. Exactly.
So let's jump to our conversation about an unfaithful spouse. And I'm so glad to hear that this did not make its way into your relationship because of the action steps that you took. Now, if someone suspects that their partner is cheating, but they're not sure, what should they do?
All right. Well, I need to kind of give some sort of like preamble to that. And
yes,
that is
please.
to say this, that the most important part of a relationship is not love. I know. We always sing, all you need is love. Da, 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 right? I think that that's a myth that is propagated in movies, the Hallmark Channel, every Nicholas Sparks movie that gets produced is like love. And even the dating shows, it's all about this emotional component that people feel with somebody else. But the most foundational element to any relationship is trust. Okay? And it's probably the non-sexy part of a relationship, right?
True. Very true.
But trust leads us into who can we love? And so with high levels of trust, we feel this emotional component we call love. But I would say the feelings of love are tied to, I feel safe with this person. I feel that I can be vulnerable and accepted with this person. I receive grace even in my messiest moments. And that right there those are the feelings of love. Okay. But the foundation to that is a core component is trust. That is the most important thing. And so evaluating your levels of trust is your first place to start.
Yeah. Are you going on date nights? Are you talking about things? Can you be emotionally messy with your spouse? Can you rely on your spouse? Are they reliable? Are they a secret keeper? Are they someone who's a gossip? Has your sex life changed? Like start actually evaluating kind of like those foundational things. Like, are we trusting of each other? And if they like, and I would say do a scale, like of 1 to 10, or you could do even 1 to 100, but I'd say 1 to 10. And, couples of high levels of trust, like Casey and I, we don't wake up ever thinking about cheating on each other or if we're cheating because we have high levels of trust. So typically if you're like 5 or under, yeah, it could genuinely be an issue or something that could be happening. So it's kind of like gathering your thoughts and evaluating on your own without your spouse first, where your trust levels are at, and be honest. It's going to be painful, but you got to be honest with yourself. Don't paint a pretty picture like, oh, we're not that bad. Like just be honest about it.
Just for the benefit of the listeners, because when we throw around the word trust, I think we go, yeah, we understand that, but sometimes it needs to be defined. And we would define trust as a place of being interdependent upon each other. You're not codependent and you're not independent, but you lean on each other, but you're not like swallowing each other up. And so like these characteristics of trust is my spouse accountable, right? Think about budgets, and people want to just spend without any accountability to the fact that we're working as a team. Are they reliable? Like when I need you, are you there for me? And not just like there to pick up the groceries, but emotionally, when I'm having a hard day, are you there for me? And so couples, like Meygan was saying, low levels of trust move into places of independence because it's not safe for them to rely or be accountable to their partner anymore, right? And then that's kind of the fertile soil for couples that are in trouble and in the red zone for cheating.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's say we're there. Let's say we've done a little self-evaluation in our brains and we're 5 or below, man, and we're feeling the not trust, and we're feeling like this is moving in a direction where our spouse is either cheating already or they're about to. What do we do at this point?
Okay, 2 steps. First, gather your thoughts and feelings and your proof, because at this point you probably have some proof, or valid proof, or even possible proof. Ideally, you'd write it out first before you approach your spouse. This is a big mistake that couples make, or individual spouses make. And so kind of like gather that, and then remember to remain as cool, calm, and collected as you can. And I know that that's asking a lot. It's simple but hard to do, right? At the same time. But I think like what happens is people get, of course, very high emotions, and it actually only makes it worse. So you want to rise above that feeling of rejection and abandonment and betrayal, which are deep feelings. Okay, so that's kind of number one. Then when you're ready to approach your spouse in person, this should not be done via text. You would be surprised at how many spouses do this via text. Do not do that because you can't see tone or hear tone. You can't see body language, right? Things can be misunderstood. It's just easy to get, it's easier to write lies and be defensive on a text than it is in person, honestly. And even like try not to do it on the phone, unless of course you have like a long distance marriage, which we don't recommend in general. But so you're going to come with those thoughts written down, and you're going to stay away from attacking your spouse. And again, trying to come with not too many angry emotions, right? But I want you to do this. I want you to think about the outcome. What do you want from this? Do you want healing? Do you want details? Do you want a divorce? Do you want a confession? Do you want an apology? Like, what are you actually hoping from this conversation? If you know that going into that, that's when now you would talk to your spouse and you'd say like, what I'm hoping is that we can just have an honest conversation, or what I'm hoping for is that I can get the truth, whatever that is that you're wanting. Actually start the conversation with that sentence. And then always put a cap on it, no more than an hour. Couples will go into the wee nights and trying to fight, and they're flooded, and it's not good. And so if the minute that one of you becomes emotionally flooded or triggered, like no good's going to come from that. And so you want to have the healthiest conversation, keep defenses down as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was just thinking about what my thoughts might be. Like, what, it seems like I got to be very definitive. What if I don't know? What if I don't know if I want to be with this person, or if I want to save the marriage? How do we know when it's gone too far to even stay in this relationship?
Yeah, well, I would say maybe I want to carry a message of hope. And that is, Meygan and I have worked with hundreds of couples through affair recovery, and recovery is possible. Okay. It is possible. And I would even say this: couples that recover successfully from an affair actually become really, really strong in their relationship, because through the affair recovery process, what they start to unravel is that timeline that we've been talking about this whole podcast of, wow, we were lonely. We didn't deal with the issues. We didn't know how to communicate. We were stuck. We were independent. We lived as roommates, and that created this environment. And couples in recovery are like, okay, we're not going to get stuck. We're going to get the tools. We're not going to live independently. We're going to become a team. And the two attitudes that we see embodied in these couples is this hungry and humble. And those attitudes are like, there's this, first of all, this hunger for like, I want to see us succeed. I want to see us win. I'm hungry. I'm ready to show up. I'm ready to put the work in, right? Whenever I'm hungry, there's usually like everything has to clear out of my way because I have a drive to find some food or I get hangry, as Meygan knows. But it's also this humbleness, right? As Meygan was talking about, like this posture of being able to apologize and recognize this is my part. And honestly, in affairs, it takes 3. It's not just the betrayer and the one that they cheated on, right?
And that's going to trigger a lot of people.
Yes.
But
yes,
every marriage and family therapist, every life coach, every marriage coach will tell you the same thing. It's amazing. Now, I'm not saying that it's a spouse's fault and that gives clearance for someone to go cheat. By no means do we stand for that. Like, they still have a decision to say, I'm not going to do this. Yeah. But there's no way that both spouses are perfect. Like, there's no way. And again, it doesn't even matter if you're the worst spouse in the world. Your spouse shouldn't go and cheat on you. But to be able to just be humble in the part of just, you know what, I work too much, or I put the kids before this, or I wasn't accountable for my spending, or whatever you were doing as a spouse that could be better. All of us have something. That's the humility. But I want to say this, it does take two willing people to recover from an affair. So you were kind of like, how do I know? If your spouse isn't on board, if they're dragging their feet, if they're making excuses, and I'm talking to either spouse, the betrayed or the betrayer, like if you're not willing to show up and do the work, like you can't force it, and you don't want your spouse to be like, well, I had to go to therapy, or I had to, like, you want the humility and the hunger from both spouses. That's when affair recovery is possible.
And I just want to add this is if because you're saying, well, is it worth it? As two people that are products from parents that did not do the hard work to work through it, I would say this, be prepared for the consequences of pulling the family apart.
Yeah.
You are going to divorce mortally, emotionally wounds a child. And I don't care what age they are.
Yeah.
They will feel it, whether they're adults or not. And what we encourage couples is like, listen, pulling the family apart, especially if we got young kids, you are making your life more complicated.
Yep.
And if you don't go through the work, you're going to live in unforgiveness for years to come, which is going to change your heart. It's going to close your heart off. So you're coming to a forest and it looks dark and scary. But the only way to go around that forest is through it. It's the hard work. Yeah. And that's why we say, like, the couples that do recovery find themselves in a stronger place because they're like, that was hard.
And we're not
really hard.
We're not going to go through that again. And let me say, so I would say for me, I would tell any woman listening, if you've got kids, you should try. I think you're in each other's lives forever at this point. You've got kids. So even if you get divorced, figure it out. And again, but if you're willing and your spouse isn't, then yeah, it's time to let it go. Just so you know, this is very important. You know, blended families take an average of 7 years to actually blend. And second marriages have a way higher divorce rate than first marriages. And why do you think that is? Right? So be aware of these things as you're making these decisions. This is, and we're not saying like, oh, sometimes it is inevitable where there is divorce because one spouse, again, isn't on board. But we believe that if you have children, you should try everything you can. And at the end of the day, if your spouse wasn't willing, they didn't make the changes, they didn't go through the forgiveness process, they didn't, become accountable, then you will not live with regret. And you would confidently be able to move into divorce. If you didn't do everything, though, if you didn't take accountability, if you didn't forgive, if you didn't do all that, then yeah, you probably high chance will live with regret at some point in your life.
Oh, Andy, listen, let me tell you, having worked with couples that are in their second and third marriages with blended families, the complication of their life is, it is mind-boggling what they have to deal with.
I feel bad.
And the influences from people they don't have control over, or their spouse's stepfather and their parents, and they have influence over your kids. Like it's the worst wish you could ever give to anybody.
We're obviously passionate about this because of our childhood, but really quick, Casey, you weren't even there. Last week, our daughter had a water polo game. My parents have been divorced for almost 27 years or something like that. They both came to my daughter's water polo game, and I had to sit in between them. I'm dealing with their immaturity, their decision, their lack of being able to forgive and move forward as an adult. And guess what? So are my children, because my son was with me, like my 12-year-old. How sad is that, right? And like, you can't say like, oh, it might be bad, it might be good, it might be bad. Like, we don't know, but we do know that studies show that having a blended family is much harder than working on your first marriage. And so it's that motivating factor. I would just say to encourage someone, just make sure you don't make any permanent decisions based on temporary emotions. There's a lot of emotions that go into an affair, especially the first couple months when you find out and details are coming out. So just don't make anything permanent based off of temporary emotions. Okay.
Yeah. And you've talked about your family lineage and the background that you guys have both had within your relationships. How privy are your kids to the work that you guys do to strengthen your family tree for generations to come?
That's a great question, Andy. And I think, a 5 and 6 year old's not going to understand that. But as our kids are growing into, we got, one going into junior high and high school. It's really interesting because the kids are watching us interact together. And my daughter's actually now dating. And now she's playing the comparison game of her boyfriend's parents and then us together. And what's coming out of these conversations that we have to recognize our children are watching us, and they don't do what we tell them to do. They do what they see in us doing, right? And so as Meygan and I are now laughing, playing games, we even tell the kids, hey, mom and dad need to meet together. You guys go do your own thing. This is most important for us.
Yeah.
They know that they are not the number one priority in that household.
Yeah.
And I know you know that, and I want to make that message really clear. Our kids are not the number one priority.
Yeah.
Okay. And baby, the trigger warning.
Yeah, I mean, my face was not because I felt bad about it.
You're speaking in good community. The name of the show is purposeful. Marriage, kids,
well,
and
in that order.
Because if we teach our kids that they're the number one priority, when they grow up, they're going to exemplify the same thing. And what do you think that's going to do to their marriage?
Well, and
we're teaching our kids, hey,
sorry, we're already seeing this in culture,
well,
right? I mean, we're raising little self-centered people who think that the world revolves around them. And the reality is in marriage, right? It's a relationship with two people. It's sacrifice. It's compromise. But again, what Casey was saying, our kids, it's funny, in our daughter's relationship, she's coming up to a year, which is crazy. And she picked a really good guy. And it's amazing. And you know why she picked a good guy? Because we set the standard in the bar and we're like, this is how you should be treated. And it's funny, she even incorporates some of our worksheets and tools. And she's like, Mom, I know you have this worksheet on empathy. I need to be better. I need to be a better listener, he said. So like, can I work on that? I'm like, yes, here you go. Let me show you. So I think we've done a really good job. I want to say, not to say we're perfect parents by no means, but it's been neat to see in our daughter's relationship, everything's being validated, the hard work for the last 16 years that we've put into our marriage.
Yeah.
Now that our daughter is in such a healthy relationship, whether she ends up with them or not, doesn't even matter. Now she knows and she's living it out. And now she's helping her friends, which is so cool.
I love that. That's beautiful. Yeah, that's it. It's great to see. You made some excellent points there. I too agree that I say a lot of things to my kids, and they don't do a lot of them, but they're watching us the entire time, and they're seeing what we're doing. And the fact that my wife and I have open conversations about a lot of topics just like this, I think, is a positive step. Now there's somebody listening, and I love this quote. A Barbara DeAngelis quote, the marriage is a verb. It's something you do, not something that you have. So let's talk specifically to those people who are listening right now and be like, all right, I need some daily, weekly, monthly action steps, some takeaways that I can do to avoid divorce, avoid a unfaithful spouse of the future. Could you give us a few of those?
Babe, I'm sure you'd agree with me, but it would be the weekly marriage business meeting.
Oh my gosh. The best tool in the world.
Yeah. This is
Tell us about that.
Yeah. We, when you work for a company, right, on Mondays or whatever day, you have a meeting and everyone knows what's expected and you're all aligned and due dates. And Casey and I 15 years ago went, why are we not doing the same thing for a marriage? Because we're having these silly fights and really it's just this lack of communication and being on the same team. So once a week on Sunday nights for about 30 minutes, Casey and I sit down and we talk about schedules, who's going with who, when, where. We talk about budgets, any money coming in, out that we need to be aware of, anything we need to save for, meal planning, who's cooking, what days are we getting takeout, right? Date nights. When are we going to find connection time for just us? And we're big fans, by the way, of in-home date nights. A lot of people think you have to go out. It's great to go out. We think you should if you can, but if you can't, do in-home date nights. We do like spa nights, and we do we love games, and so we have a huge game closet and we'll play games for hours. Winner gets to pick the sex position,
I love it.
Yes. We schedule alone time and self-care time because we know that we're better spouses when we are recharged and energized. And then we are advocates for scheduling sex. Don't judge. I don't know how you feel about that, Andy, but for Casey and I, we're really busy. And if it's in our calendar, we do it. And if it's not in our calendar,
I love it.
Every excuse in the book will happen. And so we schedule sex and we make it a priority. And we always say, you make time for things that matter, and that includes sex. But we do this once a week, and it really aligns us and gets us on the same page. So I think every couple should do that. And of course, at Marriage 365, we have the worksheet, and we walk couples through like what happens when you get stuck or things like that. But yeah, it's been amazing and helpful.
I love it. I'm all about scheduling communication and definitely scheduling sex. Tell us where people can learn more about Marriage 365 and maybe connect with you guys.
Yeah, so you can find us marriage365.com, but probably the best way to experience all the tools and resources that we've created is by downloading our app. Just search Marriage 365 in the Play Store, Apple Store. And really, it's a great experience because you'll have instant access to over 400 videos, courses, worksheets, ranging from all the topics. And really, couples are coming back to us and saying, I stopped coming to couples therapy because this is giving me the action steps and the tools and actually installing a lot of hope, right? Because a lot of couples, even that are in couples therapy, they're not given the action steps to move them forward. It's just processing hurts. And so this tool gives couples this like instant, like in your pocket, Casey and Meygan giving you some tools on if you're stuck in this issue, we can help you out.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for your time today. I think this is going to help a lot of people out there who are looking to improve their marriages and yes, strengthen their family tree like you two have. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Andy.